How's it going, everybody? So, there was this video that was shared to me. I guess it's been about a week now, and it apparently is really convincing in trying to prove that Allah exists. So, I'm going to go ahead and give a cheers to that. And let's go check out the video. And I'm just going to do a little bit of commentary on things that you have to watch out for in videos like this. Because just because somebody fervently comes to a conclusion of their own and they're very convinced, doesn't mean that they're convinced for good reasons. So that's all I'll say, and we'll go ahead and get started here.
The Qur'an is one of the most unique and remarkable books mankind has ever known. The whole Islamic religion is based upon this one book. The Qur'an is considered as the direct speech of God, which was later recorded in written format.
So already, we don't know that that's the direct speech of God. I know that they're going to go into various points as to their reasoning is to, it being the direct reason of God or whatever. Or that it came from God. There's really no proof of that. And, the more that you talk with people who make outrageous claims like this, the more that you kind of pick up on these little things.
It is the last and final message God has sent for the whole of mankind. So in order to live up to this unique status, it must contain some exceptional information. What does the Quran make so unique? And how do we know it's from God?
Okay.
Scientists have been successful in finding out what part of our brain we use when we lie and deceive. This was only possible with the help of modern technology and equipment.
So one of the main candidates is right about here, right above your forehead. It's called the Singular Gyrus, involved in a lot of different functions. But what we find is that when we knock this area out or we remove this area, people no longer deceive, and they don't deceive very well.
Now let us go back 1400 years to a place in the middle of nowhere called Arabia. Allah revealed the following verses of chapter 96 to his prophet, where he describes a disbeliever who denies the signs of his Lord.
No, if he does not desist, he will surely drag him by the forelock, a lying, sinning forelock. Okay, so I'd be very surprised that that convinced anybody, but just to kind of touch on the subject, I mean, just because he says that he's going to grab somebody by a lying, deceiving forelock doesn't suggest that he understands that region of the brain is a part of, how a person deceives, it's the functional part of, how humans have that ability or whatever. To suggest that, in the same stance, I could suggest, really about anything about Muhammad or his, characteristics that, really is just kind of like a baseless assertion. So, just because it's something that you don't understand how they came to that conclusion, or you don't understand how, that type of conversation is possible, or that person might have known some fact about, human physiology, doesn't mean really anything. I mean, it just means that that person said something that happens to relate in the future. And even if they did say no that, it still doesn't give you a step or a pathway to, saying whether or not or definitively saying or not whether or not that a deity exists. You have really no path.
The definition of forelock is a lock of hair growing just above the forehead. The Quran described this part of our head as sinning and lying.
So one of the main candidates is right about here, right above your forehead. It's called the Singular Gyrus, involved in a lot of different functions. But what we find is that when we knock this area out or we remove this area, people no longer deceive, and they don't deceive very well.
Verses of Allah which we recite to you in truth. Then in what statement after Allah and His verses will they believe?
A lot of the doubters
something
claim that
popped up there,
Muslims misinterpret these verses to fit science.
What was in that frame?
First of all, misinterpret the lot of the doubt.
What? Can ever possibly give you what? Okay. So they're just essentially, they're saying, hey, that's an extremely, strong piece of evidence for Allah, or this is a sign given from Allah. And, if you can't take, that as a good piece of evidence, then I can't possibly give you a good piece of evidence. And really, it's just kind of just they're frustrated because their reasons aren't good. That's really what I get out of that. I mean, continuing on.
A lot of the doubters claim that Muslims misinterpret these verses to fit science. First of all, these people don't know one word of Arabic, so they are in no position to tell us the right meaning of the Quran. And secondly, we have never claimed that the Quran contains any science. The Quran only contains signs.
Oh, okay. Signs, huh? We will show them our signs in the horizons and within themselves. Until it becomes clear to them that it is the truth.
Some people will say this sign was just a mere coincidence, a lucky guess. We would like to ask...
It wasn't even a guess. You're arguing semantics. You have no way of proving that that is what Muhammad intended when he said that. You have to prove intent in order for you to have any argument here. We don't speak any form of Arabic, but in the way that it is said here, and the way that people in generally are, and especially thinking back in a time where language was much was just simplified. It was much more simple forms of languages that don't have as many descriptive properties, even by the languages of today that have evolved through time. And I'm just saying, this is just kind of one of those, BS arguments that people try to say is like, well, you don't speak Latin, so how do you know that? Or you don't speak Aramaic, or you don't speak Greek, so how can you have an opinion on, the epistemology of the Bible? Or, you don't speak Arabic, so how do you have an opinion on the epistemology of the Quran? It's just sit down, dude. If you're gonna be making conversation like that, and on top of there's epistemology that exists that contradicts what they're saying. So these aren't even just somebody on the internet just throwing out ideas. It's actual scholars on the subject and actual peer-reviewed papers that contradict all of these claims. So it's not like it's a cut and dry issue like they're trying to claim. And they do this pretty often. They're all like, well, this is a cut and dry issue, and all of my sources are the ones that are the sources we should really be paying attention to. And it's like, well, hold on. Whose source am I going to take seriously? Am I going to take seriously a source that their whole it's in their best interest, and they have this bias? And this is one thing that you have to think of yourself, or think to yourself about biases and how they affect you. So if you're talking about a source where the whole it exists that there is a bias for them to prove this to be true, whether it be good means or by bad means, you can't really take that source as seriously as other sources that would be less biased. And I'm just saying that I would be curious to see, this is going to be different in some cases. Some apologists have looked at other sources that aren't just feeding into their own biases, but I would say it's more often than not, I get somebody that's like, well, I've read the Bible and I've read, William Lane Craig, or, listen to Charlie Kirk, or, any of these other figures. And it's like, look, guys, yeah, it's not against the, law to go over and listen to those people, but you have to understand that those people, they make a living out of convincing others that what they say is true. Like, that's how they make a living. There is a bias there. And, while I think that a number of them, if not all, genuinely believe what they say, they still are in less a position to change their mind. So it's not like a genuine, they're not coming to necessarily genuine conclusions when they say things and when they make explanations. But I would have to, agree, it's like, okay, you might say that these are signs, and, you can take one piece of bad evidence and you can clump it together with another piece of bad evidence, and what do you have? Just a bigger clump. Sorry, I hit the mic there. Just a bigger clump of bad evidence. You don't have like bad evidence plus bad evidence equals good evidence. It just continues bad, and then at some point it's like this big heaping pile of crap that doesn't amount to anything, and you're trying to say that all of these things together amount to some sort of concrete evidence. Is like, no, that's not the way it works. It takes one thing to topple it all down. Just one thing to topple it all down. And it takes one piece of good evidence, to move it forward. And unless that happens, which it hasn't, it's not, I'm very skeptical that it's going to continue, or it's going to happen. I'm open to the idea and will listen, but this is the same stuff that Christians do. I've watched hundreds of these styles of videos where Christians will talk about, the numbers within the Bible and how they represent things, and it doesn't add up. That's bad evidence. It doesn't mean a friggin' thing. If you want to use that for your own belief, then that's fine, but to pretend like this is a good way to come to a conclusion, for one, and then two, try to act as though this is great evidence for someone else to change or to be convinced by your belief, is a whole entire other magnitude of, I don't know, I don't even know what that is, delusion or something. I don't know. It's not like people have all kinds of delusions, so even healthy people with healthy minds have certain delusions, and they delude themselves. So don't, take that as like a severe down, thing. You can still respect people, and you can still show respect to people who have certain delusions, but you still have to kind of think to yourself, like, how could you come to this conclusion? And really, to be a nicer answer would be just like, they just haven't done the research. They aren't aware of what these logical fallacies are, and these poor arguments are convincing to them because they haven't been taught what a good argument is. Continuing on.
These people of these signs are also coincidences.
For nearly a century, fingerprints have been the gold standard of forensic science, and for good reason. Fingerprints are one of the earliest features to develop inside the womb. The pressure of amniotic fluid across the surface of the hands and the growth rate of the fingers influences the formation of patterns on the fingertips. And with so many factors in play, everyone's prints are unique.
Does man think that we will not assemble his bones? Yes, we are able even to proportion his fingertips.
Unbelievers doubt the resurrection will ever take place and argue that when our bones have been disintegrated in the earth, there's no way we could.
But hold on. I mean, Muhammad knows that people have fingerprints. He himself had fingerprints. So there's no what he's saying there doesn't, equate out to really anything. Like it's just like he believes that there's this deity, right? Or he's peddling. I personally don't think that Muhammad was being forthright or honest. I mean, but that's a whole entire another issue, altogether. But just think, it's like when he said that, did he have the intent and mean specifically that fingerprints form within the womb, by that? And I'm just saying it's a very wide stretch to kind of come to that conclusion and just not think that you're not going to get laughed out of the room. That's a bad one.
Would be reassembled as we were before our death. But in this verse, Allah answers that He can not only assemble our bones, but can also reconstruct perfectly our very fingertips. This makes it a great challenge when you know that every single human being has a unique fingerprint.
But man desires to continue in sin. He asks, when is the day of resurrection? So when vision is dazzled, and the moon darkens, and the sun and the moon are joined, man will say on that day, where is the place of escape? No, there is no escape.
Of flowing water on the surface of Mars, this finding, it's a game changer. Now, water raises hope that the cold, dry, so-called red planet may sustain life.
Scientists at NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory say new images from the surface of Mars may hold evidence that flowing water exists on the planet. This means a lot for our quest for life outside of planet Earth.
If it's confirmed, the finding could help immensely in the search for other forms of life in our solar system.
Is to find flowing liquid water which can one day perhaps sustain life. To get life off the ground, what do you need? Three things. 1, energy, like sunlight. 2, organic chemicals. 3, liquid water.
Have those who disbelieve not considered that the heavens and the earth were a joined entity, and we separated them, and made from water every living thing? Then will they not believe? Okay, so Muhammad would have to know as a human that humans need water to survive. Also, he would have to observe that many animals around him also need water to survive. So, where are you getting this? These are just really bad arguments. You can't say that because he mentioned that water equals life, or that life comes from water, that this is some, elaborate, or, this is some, inspiration from some deity. You're taking, first of all, you're really gonna take Muhammad and just like a person. You know that this guy's a person. You're going to say, okay, he says water springs life or something, you know, we just read that. But essentially that's what he's saying, is like life comes from water. That's not a very remarkable statement, for one. Like, duh, you know, on Earth for certain. And you don't know, I mean, he says that the heavens and the earth were separated. And that's also not really that remarkable of a statement. I mean, he can look up and he can see stars. Now, granted, he may not have like a complete understanding of those stars or whatever, but I'm just saying that these are all things that you can observe in the world. It's not unbelievable that you could come to these conclusions in one, just by being an observant person. So I'm going to go with that as the explanation. Just Muhammad was an observant man who really liked to jam out his poems over in, you know, high as heck over in a cave, and he released this book that was compelling to a lot of people who were largely illiterate, and that's about it. It's not, you know, as compelling of a story as people try to bring out on here. Yeah, there's some good truths in there that are just universal truths, you know, about morality and other things that are just in general truths, but you can't take things that are, you know, just observable truths in and of themselves and then say that it's, you know, you can't come to the logical conclusion that that came from a deity, because you would have to presume that that deity exists in the first place, which you haven't proven either. So this is like a lot of presuppositions to come to before, you know, you're coming to a lot of presuppositions to make it to your conclusion, and that's not a good way to come up with a good conclusion.
The Quran uses a word to describe a natural phenomenon, not in any detailed way, but to point to a direction with the assumption that there is a divine power and wisdom behind it. And when you ponder upon that natural phenomenon in your primitive way or intellectual way, in any way you want, and you could be totally wrong about it, the conclusion would always be that Allah deserves worship. And the interesting thing about the Quran...
Why does that... So that's like another thing, like Allah or any of the Abrahamic, you know, gods or God, whether you want to say that it's all the same God or whether they're separate gods, whatever, it doesn't matter to me. I don't believe in any of them. But the point being is like, just because somebody predicts random things, or not even predicts, but just states observable facts about the universe, that they, you know, automatically deserve worship or something. Like, when did that notion, you know, become true? Just because somebody, you know, does things like that doesn't mean that they should be worshipped. It doesn't, you know, tell me any other characteristic of that person or that deity. And judging by actually having read the Quran and seeing how that deity is portrayed, I would have to argue that even if that deity did exist, they're not worth worshiping. They don't deserve my time of day or worship, because I am actually more moral than they are. Every person in human history, to include Mussolini, Hitler, and Mao, were actually more moral than the Abrahamic God. So don't even go over and talk about how, like, this Abrahamic God who literally, I mean, quite literally in the Bible, yes, quite literally, it says it there, that he wiped out all of these people just for annoying him, essentially. No real good reason, you know, just, you're annoying, I don't like you. And I'm just saying, hey, you need to, you know, come up with much better reasons, or have better reasoning on, you know, why somebody should be worshipped. If anybody, maybe nobody should be worshipped. That's maybe a possibility. Did you ever think of that?
that it would use words that can address a primitive mindset, 7th century, or even more of a modern mindset. It doesn't give you any details, no miraculousness behind it, but what the miracle is from that point of view, that the Qur'an has the ability to use words to refer to natural phenomena that can be understood and reflected upon timelessly. That's the power.
The reason why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sends miracles is to show mankind this person is not a liar. He is not a fraud. He is not a charlatan. He is indeed somebody whom I am helping. And I will prove this help to you in a manner that will beyond the shadow of a doubt manifest itself as being directly from God. And so when our Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam came, the Quraysh also demanded miracles. They demanded miracles as well. And they said, why don't you cause the angels to come down? Why don't you split up the earth and cause rivers to flow in this barren land of Mecca? Why don't you make this desert into a green area? They wanted miracles. And so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave them miracles. He gave them many miracles, but He gave them the ultimate.
What miracle did He give? He made observations about the world around Him? What miracle did He give us? Nothing. He didn't give us anything other than the Qur'an, and that's not a miracle. There's all kinds of books, and then all kinds of books just containing poetry that I would say have more things true about those texts and what they say than, even in the Quran. So this is
ultimate miracle as well. And that is the miracle
this
of
is
the
hard
Quran.
to get through.
How and why is the Quran the ultimate miracle of the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam? And the response to that is that all of the miracles of the prophets that were before the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam were temporary miracles. Let me ask you,
temporary
has
miracles.
anybody seen the splitting up of the Red Sea? Did anybody witness that? Were any of you there? So those miracles were miracles to those who saw them.
Yeah, and guess what? Seeing something that you don't understand doesn't make it a miracle. And guess what? On top of that, Bronze Age goat herders and, even a Bronze Age anybody, for that matter, they were very commonly not educated on the world. I don't know if people really understand this. I mean, most of the people in this era could not read. So, yeah, this is just anecdotal evidence, and it's not even good anecdotal evidence. It's
the miracle of the Quran removes the time-space constraints on all the other miracles. And that is why the miracle of the Quran is called the eternal miracle, the everlasting miracle. It is a miracle I can touch, I can feel, I can see, I can recite. These are a miracle my senses can attest to. The fact that Allah mentions facts and points in the Quran that were humanly impossible to know at the time and era of the Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. And all of you are familiar with some examples of these. And the most clear example in my mind is the description of the human embryo. How Allah described the evolution of the human embryo from the sperm and the zygote, from this small little clinging thing. Allah calls the child in the womb, Allah calls it that which hangs. Al-alaq. خلقنا الإنسان من علق. No human being knew that an embryo hangs from the womb of the mother. Nobody knew this until 300 years ago. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala calls it that which hangs. It's a hanging thing because it is clinging to the embryo of the mother.
So hold on, when Darwin, by that by that logic, if since Darwin and any other scientist who came up with, through likely actual research instead of just these really poor anecdotes, but are they also prophets then? And they got this from Allah? Is Charles Darwin, is he a prophet? And, you know, he found out that evolution is a thing and that's how he got that information? No, of course not. And I'm just saying, like, the conversation just always goes to, well, he said this vagary that relates to a certain thing that's true, so obviously he got that information from Allah, a deity that is, you know, the only proof of this deity is through a Bronze Age book in which there's really no other information beyond that. I guess there's some historical documents that might tie towards, you know, Islam as a history, but I'm just saying these are pretty rough stretches. This is sad, really, but I'm going to get through this, and I have a few things to share here.
Hanging thing, because it is a clinging to the embryo of the mother.
O people, if you should be in doubt about the resurrection, then consider that indeed we created you from dust. Then from a sperm drop, then from a clinging clot, then from a lump of flesh, formed and unformed, that we may show you. And we settle in the wombs whom we will for a specified term.
Intensive studies of the Qur'an and Hadith in the last 4 years have revealed a system for classifying human embryos that is amazing since it was recorded in the 7th century AD. Little was known about the staging and classification of human embryos until the 20th century. For this reason, the descriptions of the human embryo in the Qur'an cannot be based on scientific knowledge in the 7th century. The only reasonable conclusion is that these descriptions were revealed to Muhammad from God. He could not have known such details because he was an illiterate man with absolutely no scientific training.
Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala called an embryo, that creation which we created, in 3 veils of darkness. And if you look at the layers of the embryo, there are literally 3 layers that separate the embryo from the outside world. So many precise things in the Qur'an.
Here is a cross-section of the embryo. And there are 3 important layers to remember. These are the ectoderm, mesoderm, and endoderm.
Okay, so yeah. Just because somebody makes true statements doesn't mean that they're a prophet, and it doesn't matter how long ago it was. Just because they make true statements, it doesn't mean they're a prophet. So I'm gonna have to go through a few things here, because there's a little bit that could be, you know, learned from this. Let's pull this up here. We're going to go through a few fallacies that we saw here, and, you know, I don't think that every single one of these perfectly relates, but there's a number of them that absolutely do. So we're going to go check this out. Fallacies of ambiguity. So, ambiguous language. In addition to the fallacies of relevance and presumption, we examined in our previous lessons. This is on a site called Lumen Learning. It's pretty good. I've got various places that I prefer to go for examples. This was one of them. So continuing on. So, in addition to the fallacies of relevance and presumption we examined in our previous lessons, there are several patterns of incorrect reasoning that arise from the imprecise use of language, which I think were definitely getting into something here. So an ambiguous word, phrase, or sentence that is one that has two or more distinct meanings. The inferential relationship between the propositions included in a single argument will be sure to hold only if we are careful to employ exactly the same meaning in each of them. The fallacies of ambiguity all involve a confusion of two or more different senses, or equivocation. So, sorry, this one here is equivocation. An equivocation trades upon the use of an ambiguous word or phrases in one of its meanings, in one of the propositions of an argument, but also in another of its meanings in a second proposition. So examples, really exciting novels are rare, but rare books are expensive, therefore reading exciting novels are expensive. Here the word rare is used in different ways in the two premises of the argument, so the link they seem to establish between the terms of the conclusion is spurious. In its more subtle occurrences, this fallacy can undermine the reliability of otherwise valid deductive arguments. Amphibole. An amphibole can occur when every term in an argument is unequivocal, or univocal, if the grammatical construction of a sentence creates its own ambiguity. A reckless motorist Thursday struck and injured a student who was jogging through the campus in his pickup truck. Therefore, it is unsafe to jog in your pickup truck. In this example, the premise actually heard on the radio broadcast could be interpreted in different ways, creating the possibility of a fallacious interference to the conclusion. Accent. The fallacy of accent arises from an ambiguity produced by a shift of spoken or written emphasis. Thus, for example, Jorge turned in his assignment on time today. Therefore, Jorge usually turns in his assignments late. Yeah, those are opposite. But here the premise may be true if read without inflection, but if it is read with heavy stress on that last word, seems to imply the truth of the conclusion. So, composition. Fallacy of composition involves an inference from the attribution of some feature to every individual member of a class, or part of a greater whole, to the possession of the same feature by the entire class or whole. So, every course I took in college was well organized, therefore my college education was well organized. Even if the premise is true of each and every component of my curriculum, the whole could have been a chaotic mess, so the reasoning is defective. Notice this is a distinct from a fallacy of converse accident, which improperly generalizes from an unusual specific case, as in my philosophy course was well organized, therefore college courses are well organized. So that's a little bit wider even than this one here. So division, we're getting close here. Similarly, the fallacy of division involves an inference from the attribution of some feature to an entire class or whole to the possession of the same feature by each of its individual members or parts. Ocelots are now dying out. Sparky is an ocelot, therefore Sparky is now dying out. Although the premise is true of the species as a whole, this unfortunate fact does not reflect poorly upon the health of any of its individual members. Again, be sure to distinguish this from the fallacy of accident, which mistakenly applies a general rule to an atypical specific case, and ocelots have many health problems, and Sparky is an ocelot, therefore Sparky is in poor health. The essential point in the fallacy of division is that even when something can be truly said of a whole class, it does not follow that the same can be truly said of each of its individual parts. And this is just a good thing here that I read this earlier, and I want to share this because I agree with a lot in this statement here. So, informal fallacies of all 17 varieties can seriously interfere with our ability to arrive at the truth, whether they are committed inadvertently in the course of an individual's own thinking or deliberately employed in an effort to manipulate others. Each may persuade without providing legitimate grounds to the truth or its conclusion, or truth of its conclusion. But knowing what the fallacies are affords us some protection in either case. If we can identify several of the most common patterns of incorrect reasoning, we are less likely to slip into them ourselves or be fooled by anyone else. So I'm going to give another example here. So we went over and watched a video just recently now about the Qur'an specifically. And I just want you to know that these same exact conversations have been had on many different other religions, including the Bible. And one of the ones, I'm not going to read through this whole thing, but one of the ones that really stands out here, and the link for any of these sources is going to be in the description here, is the truth. So people like to say that something inherently of itself proves that another thing exists, and this is called begging the question. It's a fallacy, and what where we've already seen here is this fallacy being used in the case of the Quran, but here's the exact same example but used with the Bible. So one of the things that bothers me about how theists understand the Bible is that they think it is somehow proof of God. I once spent multiple hours stretched across a few days explaining to one particular person that they can't use the Bible to prove the existence of God to me. After I got it through them, the debate was a lot better and we could discuss religion properly without this person resorting to a Bible quote at every point as their only argument. The truth is that the Bible and the Quran cannot be used to prove God. To do so would be the fallacy of begging the question. Basically, the fallacy goes, God wrote the Bible/Quran, the Bible/Quran. God wrote the He has a double there, it looks like. Oh, I see. God wrote/inspired the Bible, and then the Bible influenced the Bible. Therefore, the Bible proves God exists. Okay, this little slash here was a little confusing. But the fallacy exists in that conclusion is assumed in the premise. It is assumed that a God wrote the Bible in order to prove that God exists. Does it make sense to assume that God exists to show that God exists? Is there any evidence that shows a divine authorship? So the last one I'm going to go through here, and this is a pretty common one, is the argument from ignorance. So this is when we illegitimately appeal to ignorance to support a conclusion. It usually takes the following form. No one has proven not A, therefore A is true. It may also take this form. No one has proven A, so A is false. Notice this fallacy is not about an ignorant person. Rather, it is when we mistakenly believe that something must be false because it has not been proven true, or that something must be true because it has not been proven false. So you cannot prove God does not exist, therefore God exists. And you cannot prove God exists, so God does not exist. So those would both be fallacies. Some more examples. You cannot prove vegetables are not sentient, so we should treat them as if they were sentient. You cannot prove invisible fairies do not live in my nose, therefore they live in my nose. You cannot prove that we will not create strong artificial intelligence in the future, therefore we will. And you cannot prove time travel won't be possible in the future, therefore it will be possible. So, the point is that you're claiming that something is true because of a insert here, insert your own reason here. So like, you can't, the Quran says that embryos are a thing and are how humans develop in a womb. Therefore, Allah exists. And I'm just saying, like, this is not good argument. It's just not, it's not how you should be coming to conclusions. And this is the whole point of these conversations. And, we're getting, towards the end of our time here. But the main thing to just really think about is, how do you come to information? What biases do you have? And it would be completely dishonest to say that you don't have biases, because, and I can actually prove that. In this video, if you're paying attention, I've been drinking out of this bottle. What did you think that I was drinking? Do you think I was drinking beer? Do you think it's alcoholic beverage of any sort? It's not. This is water. So you have to recognize that the way that you perceive the world creates biases within your own mind, and you have to be aware of those biases. Maybe some of you weren't fooled, I don't know how you weren't. How did you see into the bottle? But the point is like, when you see things, you make assumptions. And, it would be a common assumption that if I'm drinking out of a bottle that has a beer label on it, I'm automatically drinking beer. But when in fact, I wasn't. I was drinking water. So you just have to really be aware of what you see in the world and what you think about those things that you see. How do you come to good conclusions? Anyway, if this is something that you like, please like, share, hit the subscribe button if you're watching on YouTube. And as always, thanks for watching.